Let's see. Alrighty, we'll give it a few seconds here before we get started. We'll just wait for a couple of people to jump on. Hello to everybody that's in here right now. We'll just wait for a few more to jump in, and I am just confirming that everything's good with the stream here on my end with YouTube in the background. Alrighty. And a quick little Insta story should help as well. So very excited about what we've got going on today. We've got a special guest here on the Drums and Drams Tuesday night live stream. This is going to be really fun. It's going to be part interview, part whiskey tasting. It's going to cover a lot of bases here, so I'm really excited about that. It's my first time with a guest. It's my first time with this new streaming software, StreamYard. So if you are on the stream right now, if you wouldn't mind dropping a comment and letting us know that the audio, video, everything is coming through, that would be much appreciated. But without further ado, I'm going to bring Josh Quillen in here, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So let's see. And boom. What's up, Josh?
Hey. How you doing, sir?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there. This is like my last official appearance on the internet in 2020, and I feel like it's appropriate to do it with you in this context. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, that's fun. This is I don't know if I would call this an appearance.
This is the last time I'm going to be in public for people. I'm going to hide for the rest of 2020.
Right. Well, cool, man. I mean, this is really exciting. What day is it? It's Tuesday the 22nd. So we're 3 days away from Christmas. Yeah, it's just that time of the year. I think we're all ready for.
Well, I'm not going to lie to you, man. Whenever you're like, we're going to do some tasting, and I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to send you some stuff. So I opened it up, and this turned in from like a tasting to like Josh is going to wake up in his backyard in a straitjacket and not remember anything he said. So I'm really looking forward to this, but I'm a little scared. And I was looking at the cards you sent, and this is really good whiskey. So I'm really pumped, and I'm feeling very grateful. So I don't, I kind of just want to start digging in, and we can go from there.
Yeah, man. I wanted to do quality stuff, like when you had mentioned to me some of the stuff you had tasted in Scotland, I was like, okay, well, let's focus on Scotch. Let's just throw some bourbons in the mix as well. Hey, Nick, what's up, man? Thanks for saying hey. I see Nick Allen in the live chat here.
Hi, Nick.
Yeah, sorry, and I'll shout some people out as I see them coming in and all those good things. Okay, well, let's start with the tasting, and we'll just kind of get into that, and then we'll talk some shop here. So we're going to start with this Weller 12, and I've got all the bottles here, so everybody can kind of see what it is we're tasting, and we can talk about it a little bit. For those of you who don't know Josh is a member of the amazing percussion ensemble Sō Percussion, and that's a group that I grew up watching the Vic Firth videos online. I've seen them in residence at different universities that I've attended. Josh has taught me in a master class before once upon a time.
What did we do in a master class? Remind me.
So I played Laphroaig at Eastman.
Yeah, at Eastman. Okay, all right. Well, that's I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes when you're brought, I'm only just like a 41-year-old version of you, right? Like that's it. Like I'm a 41-year-old version of. How old are you?
26.
26. I was 26, and I'm just an older, more beat up version of my 26-year-old self. And so as I was sitting there watching you play Kora, and I was like, man, this kid's really good. I don't know how he's gonna buy bread with that. But
right.
I was like, this is the guy playing, experimental steel drum music. So I take that for what it's worth. But what I'm interested in when I see students who play a piece like that as a percussionist, what it says to me is that you're somebody who kind of likes weird science projects that grow mold in the fridge, and you have other interests. Like everybody can play, Yellow After the Rain, or two Mexican. Not everybody can play two Mexican dances very well, but those are sort of like that's what you do, and it's like these weird pieces that are on the sort of fringes of our art form. I find it interesting when students tackle those, and so like the idea that you all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but that you're really into whiskeys makes total sense whenever I piece it together with Kora. I don't know, I know maybe that's a weird tangent to draw, but to me it makes more sense.
No, I think it's all the same rabbit hole of just exploring, experimenting, and that kind of thing.
Right.
Well, so this Weller 12, I'll just kind of give everybody the stats on this. I mean, this comes in at 90 proof. This is the lowest proof thing I think we're sipping today.
Mm-hmm.
Now this bottle is from 2015, and this was an old label. So the new label Weller 12 I have here looks like this, and the new Weller 12 is just not that good, but it goes for about $200 on secondary. So yeah, the juice, as they say, just got it's just flavorless almost, like compared to the older bottlings. And the older ones have this really like dusty sort of flavor to them, like this brick house mustiness. And the new bottles just taste like you took Weller Special Reserve, which is like the really low end product, and you just like aged it a couple more years, which is really what it is. But it shouldn't taste, it shouldn't taste this plain. So this older bottling, I mean, we don't have anything necessarily to compare it with, but it's definitely more flavorful than the new ones. So
excellent.
But these things should be $30 off the shelf, and they go for about 200 on the secondary market. So the upcharge is real.
What? That's crazy.
Yeah. So, oh, dude, and you have a Glencairn.
Yeah, when I went to Scotland, we got a bunch of these things.
Awesome. So
yeah,
man.
I mean, just tell why this is something too. Like I used to, when people would do this with wine, swirl it around and sniff it. I would have this be like, what are you, like some pretentious snoot? Like just drink it. And then I think again, the more I play percussion, the more I see somebody who like really knows what their instrument sounds like when they play it. And they've really thought about everything they've learned, and all of it is part of it. And it's like, then when you do this, it's like, yeah, maybe don't hold your pinky out if you avoid it, but
right.
Like smelling it connects it to your taste.
Yeah.
Sort of helps all of the senses combine what's happening here, because we're talking about something that's been in a bottle for 12 years.
Right.
That's important.
Well, it's been in the cask 12 years, but in the bottle for
in the cask, sorry, yeah.
Right. But this has been sitting on the shelf for at least 5 years. I believe this is 2015, as best as I can date it. But yeah, I mean, for everyone watching, like when you nose a whiskey, it's really about getting the glass, up to your nose. You don't want to dive your nose into it too much if it's a high proof, especially. But the glasses are shaped to direct the aromas up and to funnel the aromas. Like a rocks glass is just not an ideal glass because of that. But if you smell them and you leave your mouth open a bit, it actually connects everything in your olfactory, and you can really get into it. So just for everybody watching, hey, Kyle Peters says, cheers, guys. Cheers, Kyle. What's up, man? And Sean Connors, I see, says, don't get too sloppy. Josh. Hey, man. Josh,
I haven't drink yet. Give me a chance.
So yeah, this Weller 12, I mean, for me, I'm just getting a lot of like that mustiness, that caramel, some dark, rich honey.
Yeah, the honey, I'm getting a lot of that. I mean, this is the thing too.
Yeah.
Like we're both going to smell slightly different things, but when when we say these things, like I'm getting less of the musty, but more honey.
Yeah. I almost get like some caramel covered orange, if that makes sense. Like
I was just gonna say there's a weird sweetness that is like kind of, it hits you like right after you inhale, not right as you inhale. It's like boom, like right there. There's like this weird sweet that I can't.
Yeah, and then there is some oak for sure, but I'm gonna go ahead and take a sip.
Yep. Yeah. Sorry, I inhaled a little bit.
No, you're good. That's the word.
Aaron. Oh man, it's so good.
Yeah, there's definitely some pepper on that too.
Oh yeah.
Like the spice is real. Even though it's like a light pepper, it's not like cinnamon necessarily to me.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, man, like the new Weller 12 bottlings don't compare. And I have one of these that's older, from like 2012. And it just tastes like it's been sitting in a room with like old books. You know what I mean? like it's just been sitting there. I don't know.
What do you like when you are picking a bourbon? How much of, or any, well, let's stick with bourbons because that's what we're having. Like how much of it for you is like you are in a mood, so you want a specific, like there's days where there's times when I'm like, I want a bourbon right now. I don't want a scotch. And if you look at their scotches, where depending on where you are in the spectrum of scotches, you could maybe be confused that it is some type of bourbon. depending on, and so like for me, that where I draw that line. And so Scotch for me is always like, I'm late at night and I'm cold.
Oh yeah.
Like very rarely in the summer do I drink Scotch.
Mm-hmm.
It's like maybe bourbon in the summer, but like as we get to fall, that's when I start to move my bottles around a little bit. Like for you, what are you like? How do you think about that stuff?
I mean, the seasons definitely matter in terms of peated or unpeated Scotch. Like I'll only really drink peated Scotch in the winter. Over the summer, it's just like I have so much heat on my body. I don't need heat in my body too. Like
right.
melting from both sides. I think like it depends on what I eat that day. If I have a bunch of spicy food, I definitely don't want to drink bourbon. I'll definitely go to Scotch, or after a meal, I kind of want a Scotch. It's more chill, I guess, after dinner drink. Bourbon is like I've got to sit down. Bourbon's kind of like an isolated incident. Like I'm gonna just sit down and drink some bourbon. I probably snack to prep my body, and then I'm just gonna sit there and drink for like an hour and go through things,
Right. Okay.
But
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, this sort of in what is experiential. I mean, I think I mentioned to you that the very first real whiskey I ever had was Laphroaig, and I kind of feel like that maybe shouldn't have been I maybe should have had sort of a couple tune-up fights before I got into the ring with I got in the ring with Laphroaig. A friend of mine was in a Scotch club when I was in college, and I didn't know what it was, and I just remember thinking, this is just a sock. Why would anybody enjoy an old moldy sock? I don't get it,
Yeah.
And it was then coming back to me, the research around how this stuff is made is kind of what got me more interested reinterested in it, because it's, again, I don't want to keep like tying it back to drums, but like, I mean, your thing is called Drums and Drams, so
please do.
I mean, there's a lot of craft that goes into what we do, and when I see another person, like somebody at the Laphroaig distillery, putting something in a cask and not thinking about it or not moving it for 18 years, like I haven't been in Sō that long. Like I still got another 2 years before that 18-year-old bottle. Like I've had, that's like career, that could be a whole career for people,
Yeah.
That's a life for some people. So like that's crazy to me. And so I got to sort of, I put my old experience on the shelf and went back and started anew, and it was worth it, I think. So
yeah, I think that's interesting too, man. The Laphroaig thing was my first. That was my first Scotch too, and I think it was off-putting at first. But what happened was like I was just trying to drink with some friends, and this was the only bottle that we had. And this guy brought it, and he's like, "We're gonna drink this tonight," and I said, "All right, well." I mean, here's the deal. Like I've had bourbon at parties and all this kind of stuff, but this was like 2 years ago at a summer festival that I was teaching at, right? So another guy comes in, he'll remain unnamed, but he brings this bottle of Laphroaig, and so there's like 3 of us staff members in this hotel room. And I don't know what the situation was, but we had no ice, and like we just were like, let's just drink this. Well, by the end of the night, we killed the whole bottle. And after that, I liked it, surprisingly. I like just got myself through it. So I just only wanted peated Scotch after that. So I drank peated stuff for like 6 months, and it was just gross. Like everyone around me was grossed out.
Like how much of that had to do with like you had a memory of this awesome time?
Yes.
Like, and it has very little to do with the actual taste experience you're having.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's fascinating to me. Like why it's subjective. Why do people like certain types of music and other people don't? And sometimes for me, Billy Joel is like, I will go to my grave taking a bullet for Billy Joel.
Yeah.
Like I would never say, I mean, I can't like stand in a music theory room at a university and be like Billy Joel, like, I mean, I could, but that's, as a kid, I was flipping in order to stay up late while my parents had a card party. I was in charge of flipping the record, and it was Billy Joel, Piano Man. And so it was like Piano Man, Uptown Girl. And that's what I was doing as a kid, just so I could stay up past 9,
That's funny.
And I think with whiskeys, it's a similar thing. I mean, I have a sentimental attachment to Laphroaig in a very weird way. And it started with a bad experience, like, but it was with my friend, and I still love him. And it's like, so.
Yeah. Well, that's great, man. Let's. I mean, I'm going to finish up this Weller 12 here. And for you,
myself, because you seem,
oh yeah,
you're a pro, and so I'm gonna I'm just gonna pace myself.
No, do it. Small pours, man. Also, like I know I gave you 2 ounces of each, but it's only because I didn't have 1 ounce sample bottles.
No, you are fantastic, bro. I am gonna be very carefully save this. Oh, I'm doing it. It's great.
Pouring it back.
Listen, I'm not throwing away a Weller 12, bro.
No, man.
Okay. All right. All right. What do you want to do next?
So the next one we're gonna do is we're gonna do Elijah Craig barrel proof.
Great. Aha, barrel proof. So what is the difference between barrel proof and like just what you buy off the shelf?
Yeah, barrel proof is meaning that it, same as cask strength, just coming straight out of the barrel, no water added, not cutting it down to a proof. So when you see barrel strength whiskeys, you're typically going to see 127.2 proof or whatever,
Right.
It's measured to the 10th or sometimes to the 100th proof point. So these are strong whiskeys. And it's funny because like when people that don't know whiskey see these bottles and they go, holy shit, 60% alcohol. It's like, yeah, but that's kind of where you want to drink them, to get the maximum flavor. So
yeah, I mean, they're often too, like I have this they're often more syrupy, like more viscous. I mean, they're not like sap or anything, but like, and they're not oily, but it's definitely like, for me, if I'm doing something like I have a very tiny pour here, but like when I do cask strength, it's like you can always add more.
Right.
Because the experience too, it's not just like you've got a stronger rum. It's like everything about it is more intense. You went from driving a Honda Accord to like, now you're in like the Tesla Model Y or whatever, the one that goes from 0 to 60 in like half a second. And you can't just pound the pedal when you get in this car, you'll end up sloppy, Sean Connors.
Right. Hey, Brandon Arve, what's up, man? We tried to link up in Bardstown a few days ago. It didn't work, but I ended up getting the best $20 steak of my life. There were like 2 steakhouses only, in Bardstown. So I bought this shirt and I had to wear it for the live stream. So
excellent.
I'm branded here. They are my favorite, and we have one of their whiskeys in the lineup tonight, which is probably my favorite that we have. Sean says, "Well said, Josh."
Thanks, Sean.
Look at Sean's picture.
Sean's gonna be my arch nemesis for this live stream.
Oh yeah. So yeah, man. I'm gonna go ahead and do my. This is my traditional like water, clean the glass, but take a shot of water.
Are you using the same glass?
I have a few here. Like when we get to the peated stuff, I don't want to reuse those.
Okay.
Yeah. But when it comes to cask strength, you should always keep the pour under 3 fingers for rocks glasses. I mean, God, 3 fingers.
Who said that?
I don't know who Barn Door is, but for 3 fingers, that's a crazy big pour.
Maybe if you have, I mean, if he's, yeah, I mean, and this is this is the other thing too. Can I be honest?
Yeah.
I mean, my podcast is called
Please.
Honest, so I feel obliged. I loathe the argument about neat or on the rocks.
Oh, me too.
I think it's stupid, and I think people who are like, you should have this neat, or if you have it on the rocks, you're ruining it. I think you're an idiot if you think that. I think if you say that means you really don't know what you're talking about, or you have a very personal preference, which is fine. But you should say, I really prefer it neat for these reasons, but you should try both. Like, that's what people should say, because it's like, anyway, it's like saying, like, I'm not buying any bottle of wine under $25. It's like, well, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You're just going off the color of the label,
Yeah. Well, they say the best way to drink whiskey is the way that you like it, like the best whiskey there is the one that's in your glass, all these kind of phrases, but it's like, it's so true, man. Now, I mean, I always, when I give people recommendations, it's like, yeah, Buffalo Trace is delicious, but if you put it over the rocks, it's going to last for 5 minutes, and then it's just going to be, soupy water, like bourbon water.
And if you really do care about the taste of your alcohol, then think long and hard about the rocks you're going to put in it. Like, what kind of water are you going to use? Distilled water. Like, think about that water. Are you going to use, like, I mean, it's very first world, but like, get really good bottled water. If you're really obsessed with it, like, if you're somebody like yourself, you think about this stuff a lot. And if you do like the differences between stuff neat or on the rocks, it does change the flavor profile, oftentimes in unpredictable ways. but that's because you're putting water out of a tap in it, you know?
Right.
Water out of the tap that has not been aged for 20 years. Like, think about that for 2 seconds, you know?
Yeah. Well, and you know what ice does when you cool a whiskey, it really constricts the flavor. Like,
Mhm,
I
mm,
mean, when you put water in it, this is for anybody watching too. I'm not a scientist, but it breaks apart molecules in the whiskey itself, and it generates heat, and the heat is released. So when you put water in, that's room temperature, it's good. You're releasing heat, you're releasing flavor, but you can only do that to a point. Obviously, when you put ice in and you constrict all of the things in there, the aromas get constricted too, and so does the flavor. But it makes it smoother. That devilish word that everyone talks about,
yeah,
smooth pour
yeah.
makes it smooth.
Yeah, the
So,
flavor is an I mean, it's like the same thing with I love London cask ales. Like, I think that's my favorite alcohol in the world. Is just a good London
mm,
cask ale, like room temperature, like maybe just a little bit below room temperature, very low carbonation, and it's like the flavor is different. And when
mhm.
in England they serve beer, they have this like Guinness extra cold, and the whole thing's frozen, and you get it. It's like, oh, this is just the temperature of a regular Guinness in the States, you know, like you're really, and then you don't taste it. You realize like, oh man, I am not tasting hardly any of this. It's just
Mhm.
to wash down whatever burger I just ate, you know.
Right.
So anyway, temperature is important too. This is really good.
Yeah, so they Elijah Craig does 3 different batches of this per year of the barrel proof A, B,
Mhm.
and C, and then each batch gets basically month and year. So this is B520 second batch, May of 2020, and this is sort of the most famous batch in the last 2 or 3 years.
Mhm.
So everybody just, touts this one as being amazing. It drinks under its proof of 127.2.
Mhm.
Um yeah, and it's just like pure down the middle bourbon flavors.
Mm.
Like
Yeah,
there's nothing special about this. You know what I mean? It's just caramel, vanilla, butterscotch, oak,
it's all of
peanut.
that. Mhm.
Yeah.
What I mean, why I mean, the what's one of some of the reasons why like one batch would be popular and one wouldn't? Like
Yeah.
what are some of the reasons? What affects a batch?
Yeah. I mean, so when
Hearing
they're doing these batches, they're testing all the different barrels that are going to go into it, and I mean, who knows how many barrels? These are big batches.
Mhm.
Well, they're it's a limited release, but like to blend 50, 100 barrels, that's crazy. You know what I mean? To test
Mhm.
all of these barrels. And once they get the final blend and the final percentage, then they dump everything at that percentage. They're going to dump all that together. However they do it.
Right.
Some are with like 3 barrel batches where they might produce 1,200 bottles. That's going to be really carefully blended. This kind of release, which is like a medium size release,
Mhm. Mhm.
it's I don't know how much care they take with it, but like some of the other batches might be the same proof, but they drink way hotter, less flavor that's backed up by alcohol. It's just more ethanol.
Right,
And
right.
for this batch, just took flavor and proof, and it's like all sitting at the right level. You know.
How much I mean, I know with wine this is a big weather is huge.
Mhm.
And really really intensely affects the year's release. And people will talk about like, oh, this cab from 1975 or whatever, or avoid this Merlot from 2007 because
Uh-huh.
whenever Hurricane Sandy was, and because and then or some place got a lot of rain, so the grapes blew up, and how much of weather affects things like if let's say Scotland had an incredibly cold year for some reason, like
Mhm.
what happens there? Like,
Well, what's interesting is like you're never going to truly know the effects of the weather because of the long spans of time that they're in the casks.
mhm,
You know what I mean? So like every barrel except for the barrels that got dumped that year would have experienced that same weather in that area. So it's like after 15 of those years,
mm,
if they were single year vintages, it would be different, like wine, where it spends
right,
only this much time in the barrel, that's much
right.
shorter.
So it's more like a ring of a tree. Like you can
Right.
really take that out and be like, oh, this was a really hot year and very dry, and so like
Mm,
the grapes were way more concentrated and the flavor was crazy,
yeah.
and there
Like,
was a hurricane this other one, so we had way more water, so we had in the great I remember my wife and I went to Long Island, and we went to this winery, and this guy was talking about Hurricane Sandy and that it like the grapes blew up and all of the skins came off, so he made a Merlot without the skins just to be
mhm,
like, I got to do something. Like, I have all like I'm gonna lose my shirt if I don't make
right.
something out of this. and it was a colorless Merlot.
Wow.
It was crazy, and it's like, was it my favorite thing I've ever tasted? No, but I was like, man, again, like JetBlue has lost our gear before, and you have to figure out how to play third construction. Like, and it's like because you got a gig.
Yeah, right.
For me, it was like that was really, really awesome to see that there was real craft and improvising having to go on.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of this, man? This
Really
Elijah Craig. It's funny. It's so different. And this actually, I forgot to mention to everybody, this carries a 12-year age statement, which for bourbon is a long time, especially nowadays with the bourbon bubble that we're all going through. More and more rare to find bourbons that have like quality age statements on them.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is blended 6 to 8-year-old stuff. So,
man, this is just really sweet. Like I just keep getting like really sweet.
mm-hmm.
Like I smell it like in my eyes first. Is that a weird thing to say?
No,
like as I've ever eaten like my wife brought back these cream sticks from Ohio. This like a Amish place that makes these amazing cream sticks. They each weigh like half a pound. And as soon as you bite into it, like the first place I taste it is behind my eyes. Like that's like where my diabetes is starting right back here. And like that to me, this is like that's where it hits me first.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right, man. It's really sweet. I mean, that's the thing, that when the proof ramps up the sweetness like this and doesn't ramp up only spice or something else like that, that's when it's really good. Like it actually balances it out. But for me, the longer this sits out, it starts to smell like peanut butter.
There's like a sweet and savory vibe. Like, yeah, that's the other thing too. I mean, when people talk about letting alcohol breathe. Again, like I don't know enough about how it affects rum and things like that, but like I know with whiskeys and with wines, the longer you let something sit out, it starts to oxidize. It starts to do what it was doing in the distillery before it was put in the bottle and it shut off from the environs,
Right.
And it, the air gets in there and it starts to keep fermenting and it gets the flavor changes. And if you catch that just right with some wines, you're right in the wheelhouse,
Yeah.
It starts to get a little skunky if you let it go too long. And bourbons, I feel like, are the same way.
Yeah. So are you a big wine person then?
I was really into, my wife loves red wines. And I was really into, I drank a lot more red wines, probably 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
It just, got interested in other stuff and just didn't. Plus wine in particular, as you know, I mean, it's not a cheap hobby.
No.
No. So if if you're sort of casually drinking just with dinner or whatever, yeah, $5 to $18 bottles of wine are reasonable from time to time. But if you're like really into it, that can get dangerous.
Yeah.
You're like $50 a bottle, huh? Oh man, that's what a pair of marimba mallets cost, and I had those my whole life.
I know. And the worst thing is, like, you can't keep wine longer than a day, really, before it starts to really turn.
Right.
And the thing I like about whiskey is that you can keep these bottles almost endlessly. I mean, the flavor does change somewhat, but it takes a year or two before you really notice it. And I've always thought about, because there's no whiskey somm, you know what I mean? Like there are wine somms, but you can't become a whiskey somm unless you do it yourself, kind of.
Is there no official? I mean, there's no official sort of program.
No, there's like a couple makeshift ones, but nobody in the industry actually recognizes that,
Okay.
So it's like you kind of just open a whiskey bar if you want to, and anybody could do it. Anyone could open their own whiskey bar.
My wife and I went to this restaurant. Sorry, I'm gonna just turn my heater off here real quick.
No, you're good.
Second.
No, you're good. And I'll check out the chat here real quick. Yeah, Michael Johnson, what's up, man? It's good to see you in here, Stuart. Referring to a rocks glass and like a neat pour in a rocks glass. Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. We have 12 people on here right now. That's great. New channel, and I appreciate all of you tuning in for the live streams. I think Tuesday night is going to be it for here on out, but I don't know how often I'm going to be doing these. It's a lot of alcohol to drink.
It is. All right. Well, we're only 2 in, and I'm getting scared. So, no, this was really good. I would say of the cask strength bourbons I had my first cask strength bourbon I had in Montana, and it was Macallan. Macallan 22 year, I think 21 year, something like that. It was a red label.
Okay. A Macallan? Macallan will be Scotch.
Sorry, not bourbon. Yeah, not bourbon. Scotch.
Okay,
The
okay.
cask strength anything I had was a Macallan. Sorry.
You had a Macallan cat. Dang, man.
Yeah.
See,
And that was just like, what?
yeah.
What is this?
Oh my God. So like Macallan's expensive enough. You know what I mean? Like Macallan 18 is 350 now in Ohio, which is just silly.
This was at a very nice recording studio.
Oh, nice.
In Montana, and I suspect money wasn't an issue for the most part. So the fact that they gave some total stranger Macallan cask strength should tell you something.
Yeah. What was that with Sō, or were you doing a different project?
I was just with Sō and Matmos, actually. We were recording this album called Treasure State.
Treasure State. Okay.
Yeah, that's a record that we don't really talk about that much. Not be, we toured it 2006 and 7, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It was 12 years ago. But it's really cool. It's like Sō Percussion, Matmos electronica, sort of doing Americana pieces, and with using sounds of Busch Light cans and things like that. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it's a cool album. I think people should check it out.
Yeah, everybody check that out. Treasure. What is it? Treasure what?
Treasure State.
Treasure State.
Montana is the Treasure State.
Oh, okay.
That's where we recorded it.
That makes sense.
Where the name comes from. All right, what's next? So
let's see here. I think I need to shrink. Oh no, that's all good. Sorry. This whole program has so many like bells and whistles.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. Okay, I'm back now. What's that?
I'm glad you're dealing with it. I don't.
It's great, man. I think this is Malotech is starting a podcast. We're going to start it next month, and I think we're going to be using this.
Cool.
And hosting a podcast for a company is a little bit scary. I don't want to.
So you work with? Do you work with for? How are you associated with them?
Just as an artist, and
nice. Okay.
And they've got Jim Bailey jumped on the team recently, and is really turning things around. Malotech was always sort of in the dark ages of social media, the dark ages of a lot of things, really. But he's turning the ship around and starting all these new projects. And I just said, hey man, if you're ever interested in an audio section of the company, I'd love to do a podcast. And he's just like, yep, let's do it. Awesome. So,
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when I was in school and did my undergrad started 98, 99, and then graduated, went to Yale in 2004 to 6.
Yale. That's so
Yale.
I don't know, man. That's so crazy. Just thinking about that. Anyways, we'll get to that.
We can get, yeah, sure. But being at the University of Akron and sort of there was no, there was no internet. I mean, we had a little bit of internet, but it was like I checked my email once a week. We didn't communicate that way. And there were like Lee Stevens, the Method of Movement had been out, but it was like now starting to really be the pedagogical thing we used. And it was like, but then all of a sudden, all these other companies, like there's this weird exponential push. Like Marimba One came in, and then Adams, and in terms of the marimba scene, it just moved quick. Like historically speaking, I think it moved quicker than most industries do.
Yeah.
And really guided by the educational system that we have, like the university systems and the students needing instruments to play on, and that has also sort of gone parallel to the growth of the industry has been the growth of students wanting to study, and that's been great. But it has been interesting to see how companies, how that's how the horse race has ended up. And I've been affiliated with Adams and Pearl and Vic Firth, and they've been super supportive. But we're all on the same team, really. I mean, at the end of the day, like,
right?
This is such a small, like, we're like the home ec, or the like the shop. What do they call? What was it called?
Shop class.
Shop class. We're like the shop class wing of the high school.
Yeah.
Like we think we're the whole high school, but it's like no. Go, like come on, go back to the basement.
Right.
And so like reminding us, it's to me, it's really great to see folks like you in this, like every company starting to figure out their own voice in this world. So it just means better stuff for everybody. So
yeah, I think there's been a real nice push recently too. Just people graduating from school, like I did a couple years ago, and just immediately jumping into like creating whatever it is online, and it just brings more awareness across the board. Whether it's good or bad, just having more options is good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and
anything.
It's I mean, this is I'm students ask me all the time, like, you've got things figured out. Like, I do. like, again, like, I'm just making this. I've been making it up a little bit longer than you have, and you just got to keep making things up. Like, my podcast, it's like I lose money on that every time,
Yeah.
but it's what I want to do. And like, I think I have other ways that I pay my bills, but I think as a student, I think just like do, like, you started this thing, like, find your passion, do something, and just start getting at bats. Like, don't let anybody tell you you can't. Don't let anybody, I mean, people are going to say that you stink at it, or that somebody else is better, or that you should change your logo, or that you say too much, or that your plosives are too, like, and learn from it, but don't
Yeah.
stop because you got frustrated or nobody listened. Like, it's tricky. And so to give advice on like career paths or whatever, it's like, yeah, if Vic Firth calls you and says, hey, we need somebody to like figure out how to write code for our live stream, like, I don't know how to do that, but some of my students do. you know and so, like, it's just keeping your eyes open and keeping your options open too, is super key. You know what, you never know, bro. You could be making a living talking about whiskey, and
Yeah, I
just don't know. And
yeah, it's interesting, man. For me, it's not like I'm trying to pivot away from music and do whiskey stuff or spirits industry, whatever. But what's really been interesting is just having another thing that I do. Like, I've never had something else that I do.
yeah, I mean, listen, it's like the improvisation. I mean, I'm not an improviser. Like, I would never claim to, but I've read enough about like Second City and sketch comedy improv. And one of my students, Sean Perham, is an amazing improviser. It's like rule number one of improv is yes and. Like, when somebody says something, you never say like, no, 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 that's not what's happening, because then it just like shuts the whole thing down, and then you're responsible to fix everything.
Yeah.
And like, if somebody comes to you and is like, listen, there's a dinosaur behind you and it has a giraffe head and a lion tail, you have to say, yeah, and it's got polka dots and it has licorice in its mouth, but the black licorice, and like that taste, I just don't like anise. Like, and then you can just like, then you go from there. And I think if thinking of your career that way, I think is more beneficial and more useful than thinking of it as like somebody says something to you and shuts you down,
Yeah.
or you just like, oh, I've really got to only do excerpts. It's like, okay, but if you're psyched about Pandero, practice your excerpts on the plane and go to Brazil for a summer. Like
Right.
you can do both.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been a really interesting thing to figure out and learn, man. And I'm excited about it. And if I've always told myself, if for some reason, like, I have more fun creating content, whatever the hell that means, on the whiskey side of things than I've ever had, like, making drum videos. Like, I'll be honest with you, like, I love to play shows, I love to go play concerts and stuff, but when it comes to like making a video about how to rip scales or how to hold the stick, it's like I don't get off to that, man. Like, that's just not my thing.
That's Todd Meehan's corner. So somebody's got that. Todd's already got that market cornered. So
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like if for some reason I did in 2 years my whiskey channel monetized, it'd be like, that would be great, And if I could do that and have fun and make a little money at some point, but it's not about that. It's like, this is just something fun for me to do that's not hit my head against the wall in my basement trying to practice new concertos and whatever.
Well, this year of any time should have, I mean, not, I don't want to take this podcast dark, but like,
no, you're good.
No, just like
please do.
And lots of loss and lots of death and family. My father-in-law just passed away recently, and like,
Oh man,
a dear friend of mine passed away of COVID in March. Like, and just there's a lot of loneliness. There's like, and everybody's experiencing this to some degree. In one way or another, this is affecting everybody, and I think it should hopefully not make you want to just quit everything. And I would be lying if I said I didn't have that thought sometimes with my worst, most stressed out moments during the quarantine. But like, it should tell you that just keep keep doing your thing, like keep plugging away, like there's when you're on your deathbed, your monetized YouTube channel is not going to be the thing you think about. And if it is, then you've really messed up.
Yeah.
Like, so listen, that's the thing thing I should tattoo on my forehead. I don't live by that rule as often as I should, but that's my goal. So
yeah. Well, let's pour another glass, man.
Bardstown.
Yeah. So this is going to be This is my favorite whiskey of this bunch.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to tell you that up front.
Yep.
Let me kind of describe what's going on with this. I know I probably put it on. I sent Josh some note cards. I do this with anybody I send samples to, whether they know the whiskeys or not. It's just a good reference,
really
and color coded.
Yeah. It's very helpful.
So, it's good to just be able to reference ABV and stuff. But what happens here with Bardstown Bourbon Company, shout out, is they age. So they buy bourbon from other people, right? They're aging their own distillate right now. Their distillate is 4 years old because they're a new company. So they can't really.
Where is Bardstown?
Bardstown is 40 minutes outside of Louisville. 40 minutes like southeast of Louisville.
In Kentucky, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what they do, because they're a young company, is it's called being an NDP, a non-distilling producer. So they are a distilling producer, but they aren't bottling their own stuff yet. So like, let's not count that. Because they're an NDP, they buy stuff from MGP, which is Midwest Grain Products in Indiana, which has millions and millions of barrels that people buy from when they're young companies. And they just blend that stuff and sell it as their own, under their own label. They just can't write that they distilled it. So with this Bardstown stuff, they do these collaborative series where they've sourced 12-year-old whiskey from MGP, which is like good age. This is killer whiskey. It's a 21% rye mash bill. It's like a famous MGP mash bill. Mm-hmm. And they finished it in Chateau de Laubade Armagnac cask for 18 months, which is an insanely long finishing time for a secondary cask. So this stuff smells like, the richest, grapiest, plummiest bourbon ever,
Yeah, I was just gonna. It has that. Sorry, I don't. I'm sorry. Let me just think more.
No, you're good. You're good. So, from
it had a weird pungent isn't the word. It had something that hit me initially that was like it wasn't at all what I was expecting. So let me find a better word.
Yeah.
Pungent. And for the record, I like the word pungent as a taste. So.
Yeah. So this is a very limited release for those of you watching. I think it was something like 1,200 bottles made. There were only 3 barrels that they actually filled of the Armagnac barrels filled with bourbon that they produced, and they just got another 30 barrels in for a future release, which means that release will be, something more like almost 10,000 bottles, I would assume, which will be nice because these were on the shelf at $120. Everybody snatched them up when they realized how good they were, and now they sell for $400 to $450, which sucks ass. But I bunkered a few when they were sitting around $250 to $300, just because I knew they were raising it as an investment, but also like if I ever wanted to drink them, it'd be nice to have these things. But now that I know another batch is coming, I might sell off mine because I need to make that money back.
It's interesting. The more I looked into wines and whiskeys and I lived in Scarsdale for about 8 years, and there's a really well-known liquor store there called Zacky's, and they are like they can get you anything, and they're very, 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 very high end. Like everything it's amazing. And the guys there, I would call them sommeliers in everything.
Oh yeah,
whiskey, wine, scotch, Grand Marnier, whatever it is. Like they know what they're talking about. People invest. Like wine is an investment in the same way that I have a Roth IRA and a TIA craft thing through some other place. Like people will buy wine and just store it, and Zacky's will store it for you. Like they have a warehouse, and it's like because they can sell it off later because this stuff goes up in value. Like there's a market for this in the same way that there's a stock market. Are you doing this? Clearly this is a part of your economy, right?
Yeah. So there's a couple things about this. It's called the secondary market, and it is frowned upon by so many people because, number one, the buying and selling of bourbon is illegal, right, outside of a liquor store context or a licensed context. So now, what's funny is like everyone has their own morality when it comes to it. Like for me in Ohio, because it's a control state, we have very few rare bottles that we're ever going to be able to get on a shelf. Like 9 times out of 10, you're either chasing the truck to the store, the distribution truck, which people are waiting in lines of 20 to 30 right now, 2 hours before the stores open, and only the front 6 are going to get anything from a case of 6. It's like the dumbest shit ever. But We have a state lottery system that handles all of it, so it's all a crapshoot. Well, the reason I say this is there's one bottle we get in particular in Ohio that we get tons of that no one else gets, and it's like our currency that we can buy, sell, trade, whatever, and we pay 50 for it, and it's worth 80 to 85. And so, like in that instance, I think there's a glut of a product in our area and not in others. I see the value in selling that or trading that to other areas. But when it's like the single bottle of Pappy 23 and you go and buy it up just so you can hold on to it for 10 years and sell it, I don't like that. I think that feels weird because someone else wants to drink that. You know what I mean? And it's so limited that so everybody has their own morality when it comes to like the secondary market. But you're right. For instance, this release, no one knew how good it was going to be. After the first 10 people posted reviews, it was like a scramble to the stores because everyone knows give this 10 years and it's going to be worth $1,000.
It's like, so what bottles do you get in Ohio that are easy to get that other places maybe don't? Like, what is your currency?
Yeah, it's Weller Antique.
Okay.
So the red label Weller, it's like $50 here. And most states don't even get the green label, which is the bottom of the line, the special reserve. It's like $21 a bottle or something. Most states don't even get that. But it's weird, like Weller 12, which is, like the newer bottles of Weller 12 sell for $200. Some states have these on the shelves, 24 of them on the shelf, and people go in and clear the shelves in Walmarts for $30 a piece, and they'll make two G's immediately.
It's interesting. I mean, like it's like that's like your beaver pelt. Like that's like that's the nature that you can kill and trap and then trade later, and somebody else like their deer is maybe Springbank or something, some obscure Springbank thing that nobody else can get. Like I never crossed my mind that would be a thing.
Yeah, so it is interesting, and there are people that just hoard bottles. They have 10s, 20s, 30s of different Pappy bottles or Buffalo Trace Antique Collection stuff that they're just hoarding. Every year they accrue value, and some of them accrue it much more than others. So
let's hope that one of the 17 people in the chat is not the ATF. And
right, I've never sold a bottle in my life. So, anyways, let me shout a few people out here. Jonathan, what's up, man? John Amatic. I grew up with our backyards touched when we grew up, right? So we were buddies. He's a DJ now, and it's good to see you in here. And Barn Door, I don't know who Barn Door is, but makes a lovely whiskey. They also recently voted my friend Matt Porter. That's awesome. Yeah, Matt Porter, ADHD Whiskey. If any of you are Whiskey Tube fans, look up ADHD Whiskey. He won the world's top whiskey taster from Bardstown and won $20,000. So really awesome there, and I can't wait to see what he does. His channel is freaking incredible.
See, one of those people that can be like, this is a from the southern, like the southeastern part of the land, like the soil there has a little bit higher pH. Like those Master Somm videos are like,
I know.
Wait a minute, this is something from the Jura region from 1974. It's like, shut up, shut up. I don't believe you. Like you're Harry Potter, you're a wizard.
That's so funny, man. And while I'm on that sort of I don't know, clerical talk here, if you guys who are tuning in right now wouldn't mind liking this video, that would be really helpful. And if you wouldn't mind subscribing to the channel as well. I'm almost to 100, which is really great. So it's not a lot, but it's 100. It's a good number.
Listen, you got to have every million person subscriber channel had their first 100. So
yeah, right.
You'll get there. You'll get your gold plaque from YouTube one of these days.
Oh, one day, man. Well, cool. Let's go back to this Bardstown. So
yeah, it's now that it's sat out a second, I don't have that same hit as intensely.
There's like
a little bit of the grape, like that grape sort of aura feels to have like subsided a little bit.
And so this is 59% alcohol for all of you watching, 59.2. So this is a cask strength offering, and you're going to get those Armagnac notes, which for those of you unfamiliar with Armagnac, it's like cognac. In the sense that it's produced from grapes, but Armagnac is a little bit darker, some different flavors going on there. The method of production is slightly different, and I'm not super familiar with it, but a really aged Armagnac, 25 plus years, those things are incredible, and they're not that expensive. So
you know what? It's sorry, I don't know why I'm having this thought. There's a little bit of a like hint of, you ever had Calvados? Is it Calvados?
what?
It's
Remind
like
me
a,
what this
it's
is.
like I think it's somebody should Google this. I believe it's an apple liqueur. It's not a. It's like an apple. It's a weird apple whiskey. I believe.
Is it some sort of apple brandy? Maybe.
Maybe, but it's. Uh,
I'll
sorry,
look
I'm
this
just getting
up.
a little bit of a hint of that when you were talking about. Maybe it's French. Calvados, Calvados.
It's a variety of apple brandy. No, you're
Yeah.
right. And
Okay.
what's interesting too is Bardstown did another finishing project with a company called Copper and Kings where they finished again, like I think it was 10-year-old MGP in apple brandy barrels, and it tastes very similar to this. It's just not quite as dark, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But these brandy finished bourbons, they're kind of taking the world by storm, and they're my favorite bourbons by a long shot.
Yeah, no, that's great. And but and to be honest, I'm just gonna be honest again. I do not like beers that are finished in like bourbon barrels or other
Oh, really?
For some reason I am just like, stop it. Like that's my
No.
irrational hatred. Like I like experiment all you want, but stop there. That's I don't know why. Like that's maybe it's my like 2% alcohol, like the cask strength. That's where my home is the English ale. And so when you get like a cask strength beer and you're like, this is 19% alcohol and I can barely drink this, like
So do you like stouts? Do you like dark beers at all?
I love dark beers.
Okay.
But I like to, I don't know why, like I don't drink beer to feel like I'm not drunk, but just to take the edge off. Beer isn't like, I'd like beer as a cask ale as part of my meal where you don't get drunk. Like I don't want to get drunk on beer. I've done that too much when I was in college and I don't like that feeling.
Yeah.
Whiskey, it's like that you can't get away with that. Like you're already in. You got skin in the game as soon as you're with whiskey. So to me, I just have a hard time when those two things mix. And I feel like maybe with beers, there's nobody's done it. At least I haven't had a beer like that's really been like, that's thoughtfully done. It's always like bonk, like right in the forehead with
Yeah, see, that's my favorite beer, man. It's like a nice barrel-aged stout.
All right, well,
that's
that's
a
where
dagger,
you and I will part ways then. It's
dagger
okay.
through my heart.
We don't all have to agree on everything. It's okay.
I know. But yeah, this Bardstown,
Really good.
I cut this with water sometimes too because it is so strong. Like, and I think the flavors, the thing about it is it's a little bit one-dimensional. Like when you finish a whiskey, you can easily blow the base spirit out with the finishing cask if it's a strong cask. And all these Armagnac casks are really freaking strong. So like, I think 18 months was a little long, actually, even though I love it.
That's why I said what I said about the Calvados. Like to me, it like makes me. I have that note dominates just above where I feel like I keep looking for the bourbony sort of oaky or like the bourbony stuff, but I don't. It's like I know it's there. It's like a soft tam hit, like you're felt but not heard. And that's okay. Funny. That's great, man.
Yeah. So, anyways, shout out to Bardstown, and the whiskeys that are widely available from Bardstown Bourbon Company would be their Fusion and Discovery series. So, if any of you out there are getting distribution of Bardstown in your state, please look for those two. If you can find anything from the collaborative series, though, that's always a must buy. Doesn't matter what it is. But all of their whiskeys, they're a little expensive, but they're all worth it. So I just had to say that.
I'll have to keep my eyes peeled. Next time I'm going through Scarsdale, I'll stop into Zacky's and see if they have it. What do you want to do next?
What did I have next? Oh, let's do Aberfeldy 21. This is a killer, man. And Michael Johnson, I don't know if you're still in here or not. I know we were DMing the other day about Aberfeldy 21, so this is a ridiculously good scotch.
I've grabbed everyone, but okay, here we go.
It's funny, man, the flow of doing this, since this is my first one, it's like, how much do you talk about this or talk about music? You know what I mean? Like, it's like going back and forth. It almost seems like very busy. It's like, but I don't know. It's interesting.
What do you think? What do you want to talk about?
Well, no. I like the way it's going. It's just like you can't really plan these things. You know what I mean?
Because you get a little tipsy, then, like you forget what you were planned out. So like,
right? There's no sense in planning anything.
No. But I also think like doing a tasting, especially with this many, like it's important to have a little time.
Oh yeah.
Like, you don't want to, like one of the worst experiences in my life was doing the cake tasting before our wedding. It's like, you want me to eat 25 pieces of cake and tell you which one I like? Like, I was like 4 in, and I was like, I red velvet. I'm out of here. And Stephanie was like, I don't like red velvet. I was like, I don't care. Any cake is fine. I'm gonna throw up if I have another piece of cake.
I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know you had to.
Well, you don't have to. No one's like,
Yeah.
It was a first world problem I was having right before my marriage. Like, I will not eat all this cake, but whiskey's no different. Like, you can, it just everything sort of clouds together if you're not careful about it.
Yeah, that's true. And I don't know, man, how long do you like? I think we're gonna go till 10. Is that okay with you?
I'm fine. Yeah.
Okay.
My wife knows that I'm in my office drinking, so it's okay.
That's exactly like my girlfriend. She's like, I'm gonna go get in bed and just watch TV. I'm like, okay.
I've done my work for the day, so it's okay.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, dude, check this out. This is the Aberfeldy box, and this is a 2012 bottling, so the new boxes are black. It's all different, but I like this one better because it's got the freaking like plush bullshit in there.
Yeah, it does.
Which is really just foam covered in gold fabric, but
they're trying to like one up Crown Royal. It's like everybody's like, damn it, why does Crown Royal? They're always the bag everybody loves, and it's like, well, listen,
yeah,
they were there first.
Yeah. So, Aberfeldy 21. This unfortunately is at 40% ABV, so it's like I would love to see this at a higher ABV, and we'll taste it and see what you think. But this is made by Dewar's, so everybody knows the Dewar's blends. This is not a blend. This is a single malt. It's a Highland malt, and 21 years old. So this was distilled in. Let me do math. What did I say? 2012. What's 21 years before 2012?
21 years from now, 99, right? Or 98.
91, 92.
21 years.
No, wait.
99.
It is not. No. 21 years before 2012, though.
Oh, before 2012. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was like, oh my God, I'm an idiot.
No. Sorry. I thought you were talking about 2020. 2012 would be 2002, 92, 91.
91.
Yeah.
That's before I was born.
I was like in 6th grade. Yeah, 6th grade.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So this is sat on the shelf of the Honeybee drive-through down the street from me for 8 years.
Wow.
So they have one more of these old bottlings, and I don't know if I can pony up the $180 to go buy it, but this is really good. How many Hilliard math teachers are crying right now? So Michael Johnson, man, it's not in the chat right here just yet, but it's in the YouTube chat. He's a friend of mine, and I went to school with his daughter, but Hilliard is the high school I went to, and he said my math teachers are crying. So yeah, that's really true.
Well, I need grocery store math. Actually, I don't really need that anymore. I need to know enough math how to figure out how to play like 5/2.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, man, this is to me like a delicious scotch. It's you mentioned that you like Dalwhinnie, right?
Yeah.
So
we went to the Dalwhinnie distillery in Scotland. We went to Dalwhinnie, Talisker, and Laphroaig.
God, that's awesome.
Which was really fun.
Yeah, this is sort of like Dalwhinnie has that heather honey type note in it, and this has that, but like to an extreme for me, like really sweet. I wanted to say this before we get into it. This one in particular, to me, when I smell and I taste this, I imagine that I'm in an old room in an old leather chair with a fire going, surrounded by old books and old wood. Like that is what this smells and tastes like. I can't describe it any better than that.
Yeah, it's I mean, one of the things that struck me when I went to Scotland, it was first of all, everyone should go to Scotland. You can go to Scotland, you should go. The food is amazing. Yeah, I don't know why I thought I was only going to have like haggis and root vegetables, but there was of course that. But oh my God, it was amazing. But we had to pull over. We drove from we went to Edinburgh. We stayed there for a couple days, and then we drove to Inverness, and then we drove the entire length of the Loch Ness down to the Isle of Skye. Went over the Isle of Skye to where Talisker is, and then drove back to Edinburgh. So we sort of did this big loop up in the Highlands, and then coming down the Loch Ness, bro. I have never seen terrain like this.
Really?
We had to pull over and stop a few times. Like, I could not believe what we were seeing. Sheep everywhere, and just like Lord of the Rings.
Really?
Lord of the Rings, like, you just like, what is this? There's this place called the Fairy Pools that was like this. You sort of you pull over, and of course it's raining, and everything they say about Scotland on the side of the bottles, where it's just like rain coming in at the side. Yeah, almost all the time. Yeah. But you like get to this thing, and you sort of just walk this path, and the path is like 8 miles long or something. It winds out, but you're at the base of this massive series of mountains, and they are just, it's constantly raining. So water's just constantly trickling, and it pools in these little areas. And they talk that this particular place they refer to as a thin place, meaning you're like, the barrier between you and the gods is as thin as it can get before you're there. And my wife is a pastor, so she thinks theologically about a lot of this stuff. But there's also, the reason they call these fairy pools is they're these little pools, but there's also these little dwellings that are in the side of these mountains that the doorways are very small, and like nobody really knows who lived. It's just such a wild place, and one of the most beautiful places I've been in my entire life. And when you go to the distillery and you see like, oh yeah, like you see the water coming under the distillery, and they're like, that's the water we're using, and it goes through this peat, and then we use that same, it's like filtered and all this stuff, and then we use the same peat, and that, oh, you want to hold it? The peat's right out there. Right. And you hold this stuff, and you're like, this is like compost from thousands of years of just like earth crushing and doing what it does, and then I drink it, like it's such a crazy. There's something crazy thing.
There's something so nostalgic about whiskey, and it's not even your own nostalgia.
But it's definitely of a place. I mean, when people talk about a location, or they want to have like, I want to feel at home. It's like, well, there's a reason you feel like you're by a fireplace. It's because the person who made this has been wearing the same pair of like Carhartt overalls that are like 2 inches thick, scrubbing a cistern, or a still, a big copper still that has been used by the Laphroaig distillery since its beginnings, like it is the same brothers have been doing, like, anyway, it's like a family thing, and it's all passed down. It's like, there's a reason. And that's important. That's a good thing.
Yeah. Man, what do you think about this? What do you think about this Aberfeldy?
Very sweet. I mean, I like on the spectrum of whiskey, it is definitely, if Laphroaig is over here, this one is like more down on this end, and it is one. I think when I go for scotches, I go probably more towards the peaty side. I mean, I don't not like it, but for me, that's where this is landing, is more on this very sweet. Yeah. It's like, it's where the bourbon and the scotch spectrums sort of start to hold hands, and, and
right. No, you're right. This is very malty, like the malty sugars are coming through a lot, and there is a light smoke on it, but it's not peat smoke. It's like wood smoke or something like that. Right. And I always taste a lot of like that, like when you burn an orange and you put it in a cocktail, like I get a lot of that, and then I get a lot of like dark honey on this one. But for Michael, if you're watching, this is one, like, it just tastes like if you imagine Dalwhinnie, but really, really old. That I get that kind of thing on this. It's different. It's a very different thing. I think the casking is a combo of ex-bourbon and ex-sherry casks here. But again, like at 40%, it is a little bit peppery, but I wish that it had more just alcohol in it to push the flavors forward,
Well, for you, I guess I'd never thought of it, that the alcohol how does the alcohol push the flavor?
Yeah. I mean, for something that's this sweet at this proof, it's like it could handle more alcohol in it to bring the flavors, like punch you more in the mouth a little bit. It's just kind of reserved in it, and because of that, then the mouthfeel gets a little bit thin and watery, and it's like the whole experience. If this was bottled at 50%, it would be a perfect whiskey, I think, or even 48. But like 40% is a cop out. It's very diluted.
Oh, I see.
Like it's a money move.
That makes sense. I mean, well, listen. Sō Percussion's made money moves too. Like
I know.
Everyone's listen. There's a COVID, bro. Like if we
listen, man,
make a money move.
John Dewar has enough money from whiskey.
That's true.
He could bottle this shit at 48%.
No, but it isn't, as you're saying that, like what I think of as like aftertaste, the sort of residual, like once you've swallowed and you've cleared your mouth a few times, depending on the alcohol content, that slight burn is still there. With this, it's gone, and you're really only left with I don't want to say just a simple flavor, but it's more two-dimensional.
It's a syrupy, like sort of a sticky sweet flavor at the end. But no, you're right. There's no finish on this. It's like
it's not three-dimensional anymore.
No,
it was like,
and I hate that. Like, what's good is it makes you want to drink more of it very quickly, but that's the bad part because it's so fucking expensive. Like I paid $150 for this, but they're $180 now in Ohio, and I'm like, man, that's just a lot of money.
You paid $100 for that inside plush cushion that it's sitting on.
Oh, at least $100 for this. This might be $50.
My dad was in food and bev. Like he worked for 7-Up bottling company, and they sold 7-Up and this soda called Big Red and RC Cola.
Oh yeah, man.
So I grew up with that stuff. I wasn't allowed to drink any of it as a kid, I was just like, that is the most ironic thing ever, Dad. It'd be like I had kids and never let them play with Vic First Sticks,
right?
And I was like, but I remember one day he was telling me, he's like, so you go to the movies, right? Never buy soda at the movie theaters. Like, why? Because there's about 2 cents worth of our product in there. So Dad's not putting any food on the table with selling soda to movie theaters. I was like, what do you mean 2 cents? He's like, well, somebody else made the cup and that costs 13 cents. The 1 squirt of sugar out of the canister I deliver equates to about 2.5 cents. You pay $7 and Regal Cinemas takes the $6.78 profit. He's like, go buy an RC Cola in the store and sneak it in. Daddy's gonna make 75 cents off of that. It's like, that's an upcharge. Okay, I understand.
That's funny. If only he made commission on the money that you spent on his product.
That's not
if only the industry worked that
close to how it works.
Oh man, well,
that was good,
okay.
Man.
Aberfeldy's going away. We're gonna get into one more unpeated whiskey, but this one is definitely less sweet than the Aberfeldy.
Which one's?
So we're gonna do the Glendronach 21. I've got mine back here. So let me pull up the last. Is this the last 3 whiskeys? I guess it is. No.
Yep.
Okay. So Glendronach is known for making incredible sherried whiskeys, usually aging exclusively in sherry casks. Their core lineup I have back there on the other end of the table. They have a 12, 15, 18, and 21 in their core lineup. And the 21 is sort of like the prized possession before you get into like single cask offerings and one-off bottlings, things like that. So I got this bottle in California and flew it home this February, I guess. So 10 months ago. And these things are about $250. So they're not cheap. But this has spent 21 years only in Oloroso sherry casks and Pedro Jimenez casks. I'm assuming that they blend 21-year-old whiskeys from both casks at the end. I don't think they move from Oloroso sherry to Pedro Jimenez sherry. I don't think, but I'm not entirely sure. One interesting little tidbit about this for anyone watching is the Glendronach distillery was mothballed and shut down from 96 to 2001. So all the whiskey that was in their warehouses just sat there. And then when they came back and they bottled it all, they didn't want to change labelings and stuff like this. So they just bottled 24-year-old whiskey in this 21-year-old bottle this particular year. But they sold it at 21-year cost.
Wait, so it's called it. Wait, hold the label up again. So it says 21 on it, but it.
Oh, it's called Parliament.
But the number says 21, but it's actually 24 years old.
Right. So if you look at the bottling code, which is, let me find it here. Back here, it was bottled in 2019. And because of that, there's a chart that shows you where the distillery was shut down. And it's like, if you were bottled in 2019, this thing was actually put into the casks in 95. Right. And then from 96 through 01, it just sat there in accrued years. And there, if you go back through and read all of it, it makes sense of why they did it the way they did. But, the age statement only has to be the minimum age of the whiskey in the bottle. So it doesn't have to tell you exactly anything older than that could be blended in there.
Okay. All right.
So this is 24 years. I have an 18-year back there, but it's actually 20 years. And my 15, I think, is 15. So it's like,
but you mentioned that they didn't want to change the labeling. So what did they? So how did that affect their? Like, so we're looking at a label that is not actually proper. It was just like they just didn't want to update it.
Yeah, I don't know because usually when you set your core lineup, you don't want to change that. People rebrand maybe, I don't know, every 8-10 years, something like that. Okay. But they didn't want to slap a 24-year-old label on this. So they just took the L and bottled 24-year-old stuff. But what's cool is like, you just get lucky finding these. You have to pull these out of the tins and look at the bottling code, but you can get a deal on a 24-year-old whiskey that normally would cost $500, and you're paying $250.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
So I didn't even know it when I bought this thing, and I brought it home and I read that like 6 months later. It's like, oh man,
that's really interesting. Do you know is it Signatory? I think it is the name of the.
Yeah.
They sort of like scoop up very small, like, and they'll release like, this is a 29-year-old. Glendronach, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, we have 9 bottles of it.
Right.
And they're not always good. They're not always good, but it's like every once in a while, you're just like, they've got 8 bottles of this one and it comes in a very sort of obscure, like boring gray,
right.
tin, and you pull it out and it's like, this is incredible. And it's just like, it was a cask that somebody forgot was in the basement of their grandpa, and their grandpa owned, Balvenie, like,
right.
And so Signatory is like, well, we'll buy that one cask, and it's like some golden goose for them, like.
Yeah, all those. I've never had any independent bottlings, but people, because we don't get a lot of them in Ohio. I don't think we get. I don't actually think we get any of them because it's a control state. So, but I know, like, that's how you can, like you were saying, when you drink a cask strength Macallan, you can get like major distilleries cask strength stuff that they would never bottle themselves and lose that money. They always want to cut it with water.
Right.
But this one is what, 48%. So this is a good proof for what this is. It's really, really sherried. I will say that. And this is my first time using a Copita glass. I just got this to see if I like it.
What is a Copita glass? I'm using just a very tiny.
I don't know what the hell it is. I mean, I see people using them, but it's made by Glencairn. It's just like on a stem, on a bigger stem than the other ones.
I just let you hold your pinky and your ring finger out when you're tasting all 3. Holy smokes.
I don't know if I like it. It's almost too small.
Can't get your whole nose in there. Have you seen is it the documentary, the Shackleton's whiskey, or Shackleton,
yeah.
Where they found this like frozen ship or whatever, the Shackleton voyage or whatever in Scotland, wherever they were, and they found these bottles that were his, and they were frozen in this ice. And
wow.
And so they pulled these things out, and they took a syringe, and I think they couldn't uncork it without the cork falling completely apart, and so it would just ruin everything. And so they got this like syringe, and they extracted some of the whiskey, and then they had this guy, they call him the Nose. Like,
no, dude, it's Richard.
Yeah.
Oh shit, it's the Dalmore guy and the Jura guy, Richard Patterson.
Nutso, and he would just be like. And so they did like a chemical analysis of this stuff and had all the spikes, all the flavor profile, so they could recreate it.
Yeah,
like a Shackleton. And then he was just so then he went through and put where he thought everything, and it was like spot on. Like,
really?
This total nutso. And he's got this humongous nose, and he just like,
it's a big nose. It's insured for $2 million.
Yeah, because people hire him to like mean, they hired this guy to be like, we need this whiskey to be actually like, we have to make it from scratch.
Yeah.
This needs to be Shackleton's whiskey. And he's like, I can do that for you, and it will cost you. You're gonna make millions off of this. So
Yeah.
here's my bill.
Oh, it's funny, man. He's always got his kilt and everything on it at the trade shows. There's all these funny pictures, you know.
Well, and he does the whole thing where he has the little pipettes in the distilled water, and he's like, and then you do this, and then the first thing is like, yeah, he's like, you swirl it around, and then you throw it. And he's like, then you put your first little whiskey in, and you swirl that around, then you throw that out too.
I know.
The second one, and you're like,
dude,
bro, you just threw away like $400 worth of whiskey.
I know. He does that with like 25-year-old Dalmore. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, us plebes can't get that shit, you know?
You gotta coat the glass. It's like, not on my payroll, not on my paycheck. I'm not coating no glass.
You're right.
Yeah, that one, that's more my speed.
Mm.
Like, that's starting to settle into the like very caramely. Not I don't get a lot of peat.
No,
but yeah,
it's dry. Like it's not.
Yeah.
It's not overly sweet, you know, and the sherry really dries it out. I think when you compare Glendronach to Macallan, these are typically like more earthy and darker, and Macallan tends to be a little more funky and not sulfured necessarily. Sometimes Macallan gets a little sulfured with their sherry casks, which is an issue. But I think this is definitely more earthy, and there's like a ton of. It's almost like you took fruit and you soaked it in rum, if that makes sense. And it's very like stewed and kind of dark and spicy.
Let me ask you just a dumb question. Like, one of the things I think that's hard for people, I know is still hard for me, and I feel like I know enough to be dangerous. How does somebody know that they're drinking something? Like, how do they know that they're drinking something good or worth drinking? And I'm asking that question because I think there's a million answers, and all of them are appropriate. I'll just give the most obvious answer is, if you like it, it's good.
Right.
But
that's like the easy answer for sure.
But past that, what is something like, how could someone start to learn? Let me ask that. This is a better question. How could someone start to learn to appreciate what they're drinking, and actually learn to appreciate what their tastes are, and then learn how to express what their tastes are when they're at the dinner table or they're at the liquor store? And you should be able to walk into any liquor store and say, I like wines that are dry and peppery. And you should feel okay to say that, even in like the worst liquor store.
Yeah,
that person behind the counter is going to know enough about wine to be like, you should try a Malbec from Chile. Like, so for you, like, how would you recommend somebody sort of start to learn and not be afraid of this?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to do this, and the most cost efficient way, I guess, is actually to just buy a couple of cheap bottles from different distilleries. So like, it is better on your wallet to do that than to go and try things at a bar, I think. Just because like you need to come back to it a few times anyways, and by that time you could have bought a bottle. So I always tell people, you want to get bottles from maybe 3 or 4 different distilleries, like entry-level bottles that have vastly different taste profiles, and that's something that you have to obviously find out online. But I would buy like, if I'm thinking about bourbon, for instance, I want to get something from Heaven Hill, Buffalo Trace, Jim Beam, and let's just say Wild Turkey. So I'm going to buy Wild Turkey 101, a Buffalo Trace, an Evan Williams Bottled and Bond, and let's say Knob Creek 9-year. And that's going to be less than $100, maybe like $80. And then, you really need to get online and just see what people say about them. But by and large, they're single note offerings because they're entry level. One's going to be honey, one's going to be peanuts, one's going to to be and the other's going to be cinnamon. And
so just to stop you there for 2 seconds, but I think it's important. It's important to sort of learn stick control page 1. You know what I mean? Like, right. And I don't mean that to be like that any of these bourbons are rudimentary. I mean, Wild Turkey 101, Knob Creek, like that's a lovely bourbon.
Mhm.
But I think in terms of like, do you know what cinnamon tastes like?
Right.
Like, do you know what vanilla tastes like? Do you know what vanilla tastes like when vanilla is peated? Like, do you know what
Mhm.
peat tastes like? Or do you even know what peat is? Like,
Yeah.
or what peat, do you know what the smell of a Band-Aid is?
Yeah.
Like, those are things like that smells like a Band-Aid. Okay, good. Is that bad? Sometimes with wine, that means there's Brettanomyces in the mash tun or whatever. Like,
Mhm.
and there's an actual like mold, and that's not good. That means the distillery is not really cleaning its stuff as properly as it should.
Mhm.
But if depending on the region, you can have a Chardonnay from the Jura region that smells like turpentine, but tastes like something else. Like,
Mhm.
so just because it has this rancid or this weird band-aidy smell isn't always bad.
Right.
Like, but being able to identify that is like super crucial, because then when you get to like single malts and you're like, and
Mhm.
you're way down the line in something that's had 24 years to sit and just puke out flavors, like,
Yeah.
now you're dealing with 15 different things, and can you sort of sift through them all and be able to pull each strand out?
Yeah.
I'm not saying I can do that, but it's, I've
Yeah.
done stick control page one now. I can go to the next level,
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, like, I think, you're really calling upon every experience you've had in your life
Mhm.
and all the smells you've had and the tastes you've had, and at the end of the day, if you've never tasted Manuka honey, which I haven't, I can never use that as a tasting note because I don't know what the hell that tastes like. You know what I mean? Or when people
Right.
say, like, sultanas and stuff like that, I'm like, I know what you're talking about, but I don't have the experiences that you have with certain notes, so I just use my own. And that's why you get people that say different things. Of course, everyone interprets it differently, but the way to learn what those things manifest, how they manifest in whiskey, is to get the single note whiskeys
Mhm.
that are easily definable and then taste them next to each other. And even if you don't know, I mean, I can't imagine not knowing what a peanut tastes like. But if you don't know what a peanut tastes like, put Buffalo Trace next to Knob Creek 9, and that Knob Creek is what peanut tastes like in whiskey. And like, I can tell you that. And when you start then comparing later in life, like, even if you've never tasted one, that's your whiskey reference.
Right. Well, even just to say, like, eat a peanut.
Right. Eat a
I mean, if you,
fucking peanut.
if you have an allergy, don't eat a peanut.
Right.
But if you have if you just remind yourself, it's okay to
Right.
or just smell some peanut butter for 2 seconds and be like, if you don't have a peanut that you can eat, be like, oh yeah, yeah, cool.
Yeah.
That's what that world is like. If you don't know what vanilla is, like, do you have vanilla extract? Like, you
Hmm.
don't need to pour it all over your body, but just like waft it in
Well, you
front. Oh,
could.
yeah. Just like, yeah, just waft it in front of you. Just like, oh yeah, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Honey, like, just open a jar of honey and oh yeah, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Then take a drink of something and be like, I can't quite. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Like,
Right.
you gotta teach yourself a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
there's a skill set, and you're connecting things in your brain that are connected from your eyes to your nose, and like all, and then
Uh-huh.
to some childhood trauma that happened, and like, I got sick at a party in college, and I drank Rumpelmans, and I mixed it with Laphroaig, and now I can't have either. Like
Right.
those. It's not Laphroaig's fault. It's not Rumpelman's fault. It's both. Like,
Yeah.
those are
It's
important.
It's all based on points of reference. I mean, just like anything, and context and stuff like that. But of course, like when you smell vanilla extract, it'll never smell like that in whiskey. And that's one thing you have to tell people is like, when I say I'm tasting a honey glazed
Mhm.
pecans and apricot with a sprinkle of vanilla bean, I'm not talking about cake or ice cream. It's not what it tastes like. And people say like they just think it's bullshit, and it's like it's really not. But you have to temper your expectations. You're drinking 50% alcohol. you
Yeah, I
know.
mean, and I think I listen. I have these reactions too. I started the whole thing off with holding your pinky finger out and why people are snooty about this stuff.
Right.
But when people are like, "Those bullshit," it's like, well, you're probably coming from a place of inexperience and insecurity, and that's okay.
But also the person who's on the other end of it should be able to talk in not pretentious terms.
Right.
That
That
is like number one.
yes. Thank you for saying that, because
Yeah.
if you are saying, oh, to me, I'm getting a lot of caramel notes here, like, and somebody says, I don't understand what you're saying. And if you're just like, well, wow, you're an idiot, or like, and you just keep saying the same thing, well, it's caramel, don't you get it? Like, and then the answer can be like, well, what do you taste? And then if they taste it, they say, why does this taste like an old sock? You can say, true. That's okay. Like, I haven't had your old sock. Maybe you've had an old sock that tasted like caramel. You know, I don't know.
Have you seen that video of Jacob Collier explaining music in 5 ways to 5 different levels of musician or levels of people familiar? So
I've seen people do stuff similar to that. Sean Carroll does it with physics, and it's really fascinating. But I went to school, Jacob. I should look it up.
So he, you know, like he did it with, you know, beginner, and he did it with Herbie Hancock, like, and talking about music in all these different ways in this video. And what's so interesting about it is, like, you have to be able to, it's all a place of empathy. You have to be able to empathize with the person you're talking to. And so as a whiskey person or wine person, if you don't know their level of comfort, I mean, number one, I ask them. And then after that, if it's like, I'm not very comfortable, I'm not going to give them some spiel about how it's like buttermilk pancakes with syrup and butter. You know what I mean? It's like, you don't need to hear that shit. You need to hear caramel, vanilla, cinnamon, and then go from there and see if they can expand on it. And if they can expand a tasting note, then you can kind of run with that for them. But I don't know, man. There's like, I think there's an art to all of it. And I think that's what a wine som does more than just know the wine, is be able to place it for somebody.
I think we mentioned a little bit before we, I think last time, a couple days ago, we were talking about this. I don't know what it's called, but it's a show. I think it's on Netflix, and it's hosted by Jonathan Cleese. It's like an hour and 20-minute long special about wine. And he talks about tasting and sort of why you swirl things. And it's Jonathan Cleese from Monty Python, so it's hilarious. And he plays up the sort of pretension just to be funny and talk about how silly it is that people get pretentious about this liquid that is initially squished through people's toes, you know, like, and is like, in wine and bread are like the 2 oldest sustenances that human beings have. And the reason beer is low alcohol content in England is because it was just enough to kill the bacteria so you could drink it, the water. And so, like, when you learn about this stuff, it's like, oh, it's not pretentious. That makes total sense. That's why stuff is the way it is, right? And so he does this whole thing, and he really breaks down this myth of the sommelier as being this pretentious thing. And so he has all of his friends over. So it's like ritzy mansion. They're all dressed up, and there's tons of wine. And these are all like wine critics and sommeliers, and they do a tasting of like 30 different wines over the course of a day, all blind. And it's like, it's just terrifying. Like, yes, some of the higher end ones people were able to like really made the cut, but there was like one Yellowtail 5-year that like made it through the cut, and everybody was so embarrassed. It's like it's like looking at a painting and not being told anything about it. You know, you may see a Picasso and be like, what in the holy hell am I looking at? And you know, there's some Rauschenberg, there's some Robert Rauschenberg paintings that I was lucky enough to see in his sister's home. And it's like, if you know Rauschenberg's art, mostly collage stuff, and there's a lot of different variations in his work, but like, you could be like, oh, that's a Rauschenberg. But if you saw some of the stuff that his sister owned that he made privately for her, you'd have no idea. Right. It was Robert Rauschenberg, you know? And so, like, if you don't have that context, you could see a Rauschenberg and be like, oh, that's like a 3rd grader made that. That's terrible. Or you could see a Picasso and be, that's terrible. Or you could see something else and think it's really great. And it's really actually a 3rd grader made something, you know, and you think it's this high piece of modern art, you know? So anyway, I recommend people check it out because it's hilarious, because and it really made me feel it a lot more at home walking into my wine store and asking questions.
I need to check that out, man. All right,
good. I really enjoyed this.
That Glendronach is amazing. Definitely one, like, I know it's $250, but I tell people, if you want a special occasion scotch, like, that is the one. You know what I mean? I'll take that over a Macallan 18 any day of the week for $100 less. So
it was lovely. I'm psyched about this one. I had a Springbank 13, and I bought it for a friend of mine who was really into whiskeys, and he wasn't so into it. I haven't had the 15, so I'm really curious. I didn't actually taste it, so I got it for him, so I'm very curious.
So Springbank is known that they're a Campbelltown distillery, and I believe there's only 3 distilleries left in Campbelltown, but there used to be some absurd number, however many years ago, and it all kind of died away except for 3 main ones. Springbank is the most known, I would say, the most sort of cultly followed, and there's what people call the Springbank funk in these whiskeys.
Where is Campbelltown? Campbelltown, sorry, excuse me.
God, I have to point to it on a map. It's I don't know. I can't describe it to you. It's like right on the, if I'm looking at Scotland and I go up and over, it's like on this bottom. Is it kind of by Isla, I think? I don't know, man. I'd have to look at a map. I need a Scotland map. Yeah, Christmas gift for my girlfriend. I need to get one. Are you listening, babe?
You should buy it for her. Be like, I got you a map of Scotland.
I know. She really wants to go. Actually, we both really want to go. She's into whiskey just about as much as I am, so it's pretty fun.
That trick only goes so far. Like I've been with my wife for 20 years. I don't remember how long we've been married, but every time I come home from Trinidad, I'm like, I bought you a lead pan.
Yeah.
She's like, thanks. Are you gonna keep it in your office and never let me see it? I was like, probably.
That's funny. So on the Springbank is peated slightly, and people say that it smells like old rope.
Yeah, I was just gonna. To me, it has that caustic. Again, like I don't mean that in a bad way. It's like a very there's a turpentine, or like if you open up a bottle of I used to have to use it to like paint thinner. Like if you just took a thing of paint thinner, like that sort of the very first flavor you get before you get disgusted. Like, that's what I hit. That's what I'm hearing. Here's smelling here. Excuse me.
So
is that a bad way to describe Springbank?
No.
I'm sorry. If I was Springbank, I'd be like, do not let that man write.
No. I mean, the Springbank funk is real for sure, but what's interesting about it is, especially after the first sip, once your palate acclimates to the peat, it really starts to taste like pineapple and guava, like tropical fruit, like a lot. But there's actually a good barley sugar sweetness in there too.
Yeah, that fruitiness. Yeah, and then it kind of picks back up at the end. Like, I don't know. I like to swallow and then take a few breaths, like just as it's. I mean, there's just that little hint of like paint thinner. just like remember we were here. Gotcha.
I don't disagree, man.
Sorry, yeah.
It almost, I mean, it literally reminds me of being, if I was on a ship in the 1700s in some harbor and I was like just doing ship stuff.
Well, there's a part of that turpentine vibe. It's like a crusty, salty sort of.
It's like briny sea air.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it literally. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's such a stereotype. But when I was at Talisker, it was just like, it's not cold. You don't need a coat, but you need a rain jacket. And it's windy, but it's beautiful. It's all of the things, and so but it's sea air. I mean, it's definitely your sinuses are clear, like when you're standing there, because it's yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Springbank has a cult following, and unfortunately the prices reflect that a little bit.
How much is the bottle?
This is about 140, 145. Yeah. So you can find it a little bit cheaper, but that's basically the bottom of the barrel. And then the 18-year, which I've never had, is something more like 200. So, which is expensive for an 18, honestly.
One of the things that I think is important, I don't know why I feel this is important, but the sort of argument between single malts and blends. Again, like I hate when people are like, you can't have a good, like, single malt's the way to go, bro. It's like, well, it's like, oh yeah, cool, you're a single malt bro. Like there are bros in every field, it turns out.
There are.
It's like, I get it. But have you ever, I mean, I've had some Johnny Walker that's really great. Johnny Walker Gold I really like. Like I don't, Johnny Black.
Dude, I'll drink Johnny Black all day.
If I'm in Trinidad, like Johnny Black, Hennessy, like a lot of these, like that if I walk into a liquor store, I don't immediately think of.
Mhm.
For me, a lot of that stuff is experiential. Like it's because I'm in a pan yard or and so to me that flavor means a lot. So I don't look at Johnny Black as something I wouldn't have on my, on my counter along with Laphroaig or any of these other
Mhm.
ones. But the blends, I mean, it is just so folks know, like a single malt comes from, there's one there's one trunk on the tree of genealogy of Laphroaig single malt. It like comes from the Laphroaig distillery.
Mhm.
Blends don't, like Johnny Walker can use blends of a bunch
Uh,
of different distilleries.
they
It's
use
not, Johnny
malts.
Walker is not necessarily making that barley and peating it and doing all the stuff there.
No, they're
It's
making none of it. I mean,
right.
they're buying all sourced whiskey, but the problem with, not problem, but what people really get mad about is when they source, because there are two types of blends. There's blended whiskey and then blended malt whiskey.
Mm,
And blended whiskey can use grain whiskey in the mix. It could use corn grain, whatever grain, neutral grain, and then the others have to use single malts in the blend. You
right.
always want to get a blended malt if you can. And there's only one blended malt in the Johnny Walker lineup, and that's Johnny Walker Green, believe it or not.
Mm,
And that's a damn, I mean, dude, it'll stand up to like this Springbank for me. It's really close because
mhm,
it's more heavily peated than a lot of them.
mhm,
But Johnny Green for a $75 bottle is incredible, and I don't like the bad rap that blends get, but I mean, of course, there are generic blends,
mhm.
and makes a lot of sense. But like this Johnny Walker, I have a 1982 Johnny Walker Black that I got a month ago. It tastes better than this Glendronach 21 by a mile, and it's very odd. But back
Yeah,
then they used more quality spirits in there, and now they don't. Which
yeah. I only bring it up just to say, like, I think people should feel like, again, if you walk into Zacky's liquor,
hmm
no one is going to look at you negatively or in a judgmental way if you say, hey, I grew up drinking Johnny Walker. It was always in my house. My dad was a Johnny Walker Red guy. I drank black in college because I wanted to one up my dad. I was feeling a little snooty, so I was getting the black. Do you have any recommendations? Like, I got $120 to spend. Do you have any recommendations of a really good blend? I just have a sense, like, that
Yeah,
person in that place will be like, absolutely, come with me. And they're not
yeah.
going to try to sell you a single malt. They're going to give you what you ask for. And
hmm
somebody who's like, oh, you should have this, like, if they start turning you away from the thing you asked for, that should be a red flag. Like, you should, danger, danger, Will Robinson, get out of there.
Yeah.
you know
Well, this is kind of what bothers me too about people having blending as a bad rap is because like if you look at the bourbon world, for instance, most bourbon is blended.
Mhm,
It's not coming from a single cask. It's being batched together. And if they age state it, they're probably putting older whiskey in there too,
mhm,
to balance it out. And they're just listing the youngest age or whatever. But everything just about is blended. And even at the end of single malts, it's being blended. If they can, because it's single malt, doesn't mean they're going to put 12-year-old Laphroaig in the 10-year-old bottle, some percentage
mhm.
to balance the flavor. So it's like it's all being blended. That's just why I can't understand this. I mean, I know that the barley and the yeast strains are all the same in a single malt. I get that, but
Right. I mean, at least with a Laphroaig blend or a Laphroaig single malt, like, they may be but they're blending their own stuff.
they're blending their own stuff,
Like
and it
Johnny
worked.
Walker is going to be taking something. They're going to be taking stuff from Laphroaig and from these other places too that
Mhm.
are going to be mixed in and made into these different versions. Like, yeah, it's the same thing. It's like when I learned that Vic Firth made the Zildjian drumsticks, I was like, wait a minute.
Right.
It was like, oh, of course. Then you start to recognize, like, wait a minute, their sticks look a lot like the fat. Oh yeah, okay, like, of
Right.
course. That makes total sense. But that's like, it's interesting to me that all
Yeah.
industries have blends and single malts.
Uh-huh.
and,
They do.
and there are great versions of all of it, but it's true.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny,
Just
man. I'm glad
competitive.
I'm glad you said that. Springbank is like I can't drink it every night,
Mhm.
but man, it's one of my favorites. Like if I'm looking for something that's not as peated as what we're about to drink, um, I'll go to that Springbank all day. And then otherwise, I mean, yeah, Johnny Green. I go to that maybe before I would go to the Springbank as an everyday.
Johnny Green was the first. As sorry, when you pointed that Laphroaig bottle, yes, it's the travel exclusive, right?
Yeah,
Like,
unfortunately.
you can only get it in duty free shops in
Yeah. Well, you
in
can. I've heard that you can get it other. I mean, I could. you can get it from secondary sources, I would say,
I've
pretty easily.
I've
But
never tried to, but it's interesting. I'm having a weird, like, sad moment. Like,
Mhm.
I wore this hat because it has paint on it still from Carnival a year ago, which was the last
Oh,
time I was out in public prior to the quarantine. Um,
wow.
like in February of 2020, last year, we went to Trinidad for Carnival, and
Mhm.
and so seeing, but again, just like traveling back, going through international airports, it's like that is a place where I feel like there's like a really huge amount of whiskey experimentation happening.
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and then I go to Zacky's and I'm like, do you have this? And they're like, no, we can't get that. I'm like, so you're telling me the only place I can buy this is next to the Orange Julius at JFK? Like,
Yeah.
that makes no sense
I
to me.
know, I know. And what's crazy is, like, the travel retail market is typically upcharged bottles for rich business people that are flying.
Mhm.
But, like, I bought this Laphroaig for, like, 72 pounds. This is a 1-liter bottle. It's like $100, dude, and this is, like, an amazing Laphroaig.
But I've always felt like duty-free shops are the best place to buy whiskey
They
because
are.
and then, like, you can get like 2 bottles of Laphroaig 10-year for $32.99. I'm like,
Dude, it's silly, and I don't know. I remember I got this in the UK. I was in what's it's not Heathrow, it's the other one that everyone flies through.
London, Glasgow.
It starts with a G, I
Oh,
think.
Gatwick.
Gatwick, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was flying through Gatwick on the way home from Germany in last November, and we brought this back. And my buddy was like a level 1 som out in San Francisco, and he was like, "Dude, you got to crack that open before you go to Ohio." And I'm like, "I don't know if I should fly with it open to Ohio." He's like, "Just do it, man. Just do it." So we cracked it open at his place the last night I was in town before I came back home, and I don't know. It's just been a special bottle, so I'm trying to make it last as long as I can. But it's a 1 liter, and I've probably got 250 milliliters, 300 left. So
It makes me just so sad because, like, one of the thing, like, listen, I don't miss commuting
uh-huh.
to work just to go to rehearsals or to teach or whatever. I don't miss that at all.
Uh-huh.
I don't miss being away from my wife. I don't miss sleeping in hotel rooms, but there is, like, the thing I do miss the most about the quarantine is
Mhm.
just being around people, going through duty free shops. The amount of conversations I had with people in duty free shops just about whiskey,
Mhm.
that's a large part of my life, you know. And so when I see that little red stripe, to me, I'm also tasting whiskey where there's just a cloud of perfume.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. It's like there's all these. What do you taste? I taste I taste White Diamonds by Elizabeth Taylor. That's what
Yeah.
I taste.
Grandma's rose petals.
Yeah, like, holy crap! I'm detecting hints of Drakkar Noir, you know. And so, like, they're always right next to each other, but, like, I don't know. To me, that's why humans are kind of the worst and the best at the same time,
That's so funny.
And they always
Yeah.
probably, like, duty free shops, like, you have to go through both. You got to,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
cloud of perfume. And
Oh, man.
is anybody even listening to this, or is everybody gone?
There's like 6 people in here. I mean, it's interesting. I actually thought there would be more, but
Oh,
the other
thanks.
thing too is any bourbon people that would have been in here, they might be in the Bourbon Junkies live stream, which is like they have like 60,000 followers. They do theirs at 9 p.m. on Tuesdays, which is why I'm going to move mine back to 7:30.
Oh, shit, man.
What's that?
We have a competing. It's all right. Listen,
Oh, there's no competition.
this is going to go up, and you're going to release this,
Uh-huh.
like, so people can watch it later, right? Okay.
Yeah, oh yeah. So, oh man, this Laphroaig.
Yeah. That is in the basement of my friend Ron Martin's house, drinking the very first taste of scotch that I ever had.
Dude.
That sort of, yeah, it's that sock. It just,
It's iodine and band-aids and tires.
yeah, it's just like a fresh Band-Aid, and you wrap your whole eyeball with the Band-Aid, each eyeball. Like, you got to take the plastic thing off, like, just so you really get it all. But it's the thing that I notice about Laphroaig more than, and maybe I'm just missing this, but like Laphroaig, they talk about, this is the other thing that, like, wine people, when they get snooty, they talk about the legs.
Uh-huh.
So, like, when wine, stuff, you can tell the viscosity based on these sort of streaks that show up, right? Laphroaig, I wouldn't say it's syrupy, but I taste it everywhere in my mouth, which I think is that's a unique thing to me. Of all these we've tasted, like some hit you in different spots. This one is like every part of my mouth.
Yeah,
kind of experiencing the same thing, which is
phenols, awesome. Dude, phenols.
Yeah.
I don't know what the ppm is on this of the of the level of phenols in here, but what's nice about this over regular Laphroaig is that it was, so there's a bunch of different kinds of Laphroaig, right? There's the quarter cask, the lore, triple wood, all that, This is Laphroaig 10 that has then been moved to quarter casks, which then gets moved to Pedro Jimenez sherry cask to finish. So like it gets mellowed out in the quarter cask with some vanilla, and then it gets mellowed out with like sherry fruits in the PX cask. I like this more than regular Laphroaig. Just takes the hide off your tongue, It's like
that's like you've had a bad day and you want to punish yourself a little bit. Like
you're just pissed.
Like cut me, Mick.
It's a masochistic drink.
Yeah.
But this one is like
done something wrong and you have a regret that you need to forget,
Yeah. But this one, man, I really I don't know. I think this is great. Like I could sit and drink this.
What when you put something in the quarter cask, my instinct is that would increase the flavor profile in some way, because it's allowing us, like there's a a higher percentage of the liquid has contact with the barrel. But that's probably a terrible assumption. Like what is putting it in a quarter cask do?
No, that's exactly it. It's a higher liquid to cask kind of ratio of what's touching it. So usually, I mean, they're probably reusing those. They're probably not brand new white American oak, but they are using American oak quarter cask for this. But because it's just higher contact and an additional casking, it's usually more vanilla and just more, and it ages faster because it's in a smaller cask and there's less liquid. So they probably don't put Laphroaig 10 into the quarter cask. They're probably putting.
You just kind of blew my mind. Why does it age faster?
So
isn't the arrow of time the same for everybody, Cameron?
It is. Yeah, right. But the smaller casks with less liquid in them are going to age faster. So, for instance, there's
said the same thing. You did.
No. I'll get there. But there are charts that kind of show you the way that this works because of the surface contact with the wood and how all of that works. So, for instance, you can get a 2-gallon, or is it 2-liter, the mini casks that you can age in at your house. I think if you leave liquid in there for a year, it's the equivalent of like a 5-year aging in a true 53-gallon barrel.
So
time goes faster, and no, I'm just kidding.
Einstein's relativity applies to. So I guess my question is, when we talk about like when a distillery, let's say we're drinking Laphroaig, right? So they're basing, if they could get their 18-year whiskey tasting like an 18-year whiskey, but do it in 5 years because of some crazy barrel process that they invented, they would do that and it would still be a Laphroaig 18-year. So we're not talking about like it's just the amount of time it takes to make something taste a certain way, right? Like that's why Laphroaig 18-year tastes like it does, because it had to sit in that particular barrel for 18 years. If you were to devise like a crazy new type of barrel that is smaller and you somehow figured out how to increase the surface area of all of the liquid, it's a very long, thin barrel, so that all of the liquid is constantly touching the sides, right?
No,
I
got you.
Like, does it matter? Like, would there be some purists who's like, no, like it's not the same? But you're telling me it is the same.
I don't know if it's the same.
You're telling me though that like a 5-year process can be, a 12-year process can be reduced to 5. That's magic.
Yeah, I don't know. This is what again, I can't speak to this. I don't have firsthand experience with it, but I would assume that there is something about the amount of time, regardless, whatever word, of the barrel size and all that stuff, that there's something different about it. I would have to assume that there's a reason they don't use all quarter casks. Well, the other reason would be this. the American whiskey industry that they're buying their ex-bourbon barrels from are not using primarily quarter casks. So they would have to have those made, and they would have to have bourbon put in them. It would make no sense. So that would probably be a reason. But I don't know, man. There's got to be something different about it. I've never aged anything at my, like, in a small barrel to know kind of what that influence tastes like. But yeah, I think a lot of things, in a lot of cases, they do use it to accelerate the process behind the scenes so they can get stuff out faster. Like, I think with the Laphroaig quarter cask in particular, that bottle is 5-year-old Laphroaig put into quarter casks and then bottled after some amount of time.
Okay.
So it's not 10 years old like the normal 10-year would be.
I mean, as soon as I asked the question, like, first of all, I'm not the first person who have ever had that thought, and I'm sure that
Sure.
I've been, it's like as soon as I think I have a musical thought, it turns out Merce Cunningham or somebody did it thousands of years ago. I think somebody had to have, for hundreds of years, they've been doing this specific way. And there's one thing that's tradition, and there's one reason to adhere to tradition. But I think they must have figured out that this is the only way to get this stuff to taste the way it is to age it the way they age it.
Right.
And you can't, it's like people have tried to stamp out steel drums in a press. You can't swap out the process of manually manipulating that metal slowly over time. You just can't. Like,
yeah.
At least right now, no one's been able to do that. And it's like, sorry, hand hammered is the way to go. It's like, there's the argument of our hand hammered cymbals versus whatever, and I think I'm going to take back my question. Of course you need, you shouldn't sidestep the process, even if you can.
Right.
Stick it in the bottle for 18 years and don't look at it.
But the problem would be too, the marketing of it. They would have to say that it's only a 5-year whiskey. You know what I mean? Even if it tasted 15 or something. So, and people wouldn't trust that, I don't think. I don't know. Dude.
Well, I mean, over time, taste is taste. And so, people's I mean, it'd be an interesting social experiment, I think, if Laphroaig could make a 5-year whiskey that tasted like an 18-year whiskey and no one could be convinced otherwise. What happens in 20 years from now? Like, people all of a sudden are looking at, I don't know, like, does it change the way you is knowing something's 20 years old changed? Does that change the way you taste it?
Right.
I would say yes.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power, my friend.
No, I think so. Context.
Yeah.
And there's like some romanticism about it all, about age and the nostalgia of the process. But I don't know. I like blind tastings to an extent. For me, they're fun to train my palate and to guess things and stuff like that. It is fun to do it when if I have 4 batches of Stag Junior, and I'll blind them all because they all have the same provenance and like relationship to me. They're just different batches. But yeah, if you're talking about like a 50-year-old whiskey, like I want to know that that's 50 years old, because then if there is something that's weird and rough around the edges, but then you find out like something about the barrel that it was kept in, or just something random, that's good context that you want to know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole argument around, again, like whether people want to have the little placard at the museum, whether you want to read that or not before.
Right.
And does it color the way you take in some work of art if you know that it was because the artist lost their daughter to tuberculosis or something? Like, is that important to know? I don't know. Like, maybe to the artist, I don't know. It's kind of up to the artist, perhaps. Like, does the artist want you to know that stuff? And it seems to me like most of the artists who make these whiskeys, it's clear they want you to know that there's a lot of care that went into this stuff. I mean, my experience in going to the distillery is not so much different than, truthfully, than being in Sō Percussion or playing, with lots of different people and having a community of folks. I mean, it's there's a family. There are people that make this. There are people that everybody knows their name when they walk in that distillery, and there's a guy up the walkway that sells oysters that you can go eat that were just plucked out of the thing, and it's like they've been doing that for years. And I think that sort of approach to community, I think that affects the way, that's why this stuff tastes the way it does. Because everybody in that community has had a hand in it, or has decided that over the last 100, I mean, listen, like I said up front, like I'm a 41-year-old version. The Laphroaig distillery is only now like, how old are they?
I don't know. I wish I knew.
Let's say the bare minimum
1815 founded, established.
1815. So like 205 years.
Mm-hmm.
The 2020 version of Laphroaig is just a 205-year-old version of the 1815 version.
Uh-huh.
And so they've had 205 years of people being like, bro, your shit tastes terrible. Go back to the drawing board, you know. And then the next year, like, a little better, but still not going to sell it to anybody, you know. And then by 1823, they figured out enough to be like, all right, cool. Maybe we should have left that in the bottle for 10 years, you know.
That's going to be a soundbite.
Yeah.
I'm going to chop that right there.
Which one?
What you just said about Laphroaig, and I'm going to send that to Laphroaig. I'm kidding.
Okay, well, whatever. Right? I've got nothing to lose with Laphroaig.
That's so funny.
But it's, you know, it's
no,
true.
You're right. You're right.
It's true. And I think anything old like that has a history and has a way of doing things. And I think you can look at art the same way. I think you can look at the Cleveland Orchestra, or you can look at you know, Skiffle Bunch Steel Orchestra in Trinidad, which has been around since the I believe the 70s. You know, or Phase 2 Pangroove has been around from the 70s. The reason Phase 2 Pangroove's music sounds the way it does is because Boogsie Sharp has been arranging for them for 40 years, you know, and they've had 40 years of somebody being like, Boogsie, bro, don't change the tune up one day before the competition. You got to give us some time, you know. And then, like, you know, and then he's won a bunch, and it's like, now there's a culture. There's people who bring food, and we know who that person is in the yard, and there's a guy that comes and picks up the trash, you know. It's a thing now. And I think when people think about how to get into whiskey or wine or whatever, let that sort of be part of the equation too. What you're looking at is a bottle. Yes, you may have had a bad experience in college with it, but that's not that's not Elijah Craig's fault. That's your fault. And you know that there's a lot of work and a lot of time, a lot of research went into just to looking at that label. A lot of people argued over whether or not there should be one red stripe or two.
Yeah.
And the person who said one made a compromise. The person who said one it was like, fine, you get to have the outside with the two stripes, but I get to be on the bottle. And they're like, okay, fine. You know, like that discussion happened at Laphroaig. I would put money on it, you know. And here we are looking at a compromise. And I think that's awesome. And all that stuff is important. So, but yeah, man, I really appreciate you having me on. And I am actually pleasantly surprised with how I feel. I don't think I'll wake up in the middle of the street.
No, I think we're good. In
my underwear.
And I mean, yeah, I left a bunch of like open or unfinished pours here on my table because
it's all right. That's what do they call it? The angel share.
Yeah, right. I'm trying to, or the devil share. I don't know, but I'm at this point, I'm too old. I feel too old to be drinking this much. I'm like, I went through a phase, honestly, through quarantine where I was trying so many whiskeys. I went like accelerated palate development. Let's call it that. And you know, I was trying like 9-10 whiskeys a night. You know what I'm saying? And it got to a point where I was like, I need to slow this down because this is getting out of hand. So I have gotten to a point now where I have a very addictive personality. Of course, I think a lot of us do in our field, but I've gotten to a point where I can kind of control that, you know, much better now, which is nice. So I was like worried about tonight too. I'm like, man, I just set up 7 whiskeys for this tasting. I'm so screwed.
I've had, you know, listen, it's you have at bats, and you learn when to not swing at the screwball, you know.
Yeah.
and so now I know enough to know when I just need to take one sip, and you know, and to me, I have whiskeys hit me harder than say clear alcohols. So like I spent a lot of time in the Caribbean, and so rums are really, I love. I don't drink a lot of scotches down in Trinidad.
Yeah.
And so like rum is a big thing. So for me, like my white whale is trying to find this type of rum called white oak. That I think you got muted, buddy. Unless I accidentally.
There we go. No, I don't know how I muted myself.
It's called white oak, and it's like I wouldn't say it is the best rum I've ever had my entire life, but it is a very special rum to me because of the people I know who first gave it to me, you know. But I can't find it anywhere here. Zacky's doesn't carry it. you know, and so like that's my like white whale.
Yeah.
But you know, I think, you know, I really recommend people sort of, if you are, again, if you have genuine problems, don't drink.
Right.
Like, you know, be careful. But
Right.
if you are interested in this stuff, I think there's a real, it is equally addictive in terms of, you know, what you can learn about a place and, you
Hmm.
know, why certain soils do things and the traditions of a place. And, you know, I think use this as a learning opportunity. Um,
Hmm.
and then you'll see a lot of parallels in the way that you do art or study accounting or whatever it is. It all is the same, you know.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. I appreciate you coming on. I mean, I think we should. I mean, I don't do my podcast anymore. I might bring it back at some point, but this is just kind of, this is not necessarily a podcast, but if you ever want to talk and do a real podcast episode outside of whiskey, let me know. I mean, this
Yeah.
would be a lot of fun to talk more music. I didn't know how much music we get to today, but like when I was advertising, I'm like, I'll just say something about music or touring musician or some shit like that, you know?
It's okay. I'm fine to talk about. I mean, I spend a lot of time talking about music, you know,
Hmm.
for a job. So I'm absolutely fine to talk about it, but I'm also fine to talk about whiskey. And
Yeah.
I'd love to have you on my podcast, and we, you know, just talk a lot about. I mean, I would love to pick your brain and just think, you know, hear your story a little bit. You know, what
Hmm.
got you into percussion? Clearly, drums are of an interest to you still because it's in the name of your 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 marketing, but it's also, you know, been part of your life. That's how we met, and so I would love
Hmm.
to just keep picking your brain about that. And I think also too, just to give other students the idea, you know, just a sense that there's other stuff other than Kiji. Kiji's important.
Yeah.
You know, put that quiver in your bag. You may need it someday, but also don't neglect people and sort of talking to people about, you know, I have this weird thing, like I don't vape, but if you want to have an interesting conversation, go into a vape store. I'm being serious. Like everything we're talking about here exists in the vape world too. And there are sommeliers of vapes. And I don't recommend people vape, but in this quarantine, I have not seen many people. And when I go downtown to walk around just to get out of the house and
Hmm.
every restaurant's closed, you know what's open? The vape shops. And I will just go in and I'll just be like, what's that? And they're like, oh, that's a Nick Salt thing. I'm like, what's a Nick Salt? And then like, oh, these are the vapes. They don't have this. It's like, oh, that's weird. What's that? And it's like, you know, next thing you know, it's like I'm being told about where these vapes are curated. It's like, I don't actually want to. They're like, no, I don't actually. But these are just interesting conversations, you know.
Right.
So
That's
anyway, just
funny.
to say, like, I encourage people just to keep asking questions and you're doing a good thing, man. So keep it up. When you get, you know, 60,000 subscribers,
Yeah.
just remember us little people.
Yeah.
Remember those
Right.
of us who helped you get to your, you know, helped you get to your 60,000. I'd love to come back on and sort of taste some different whiskeys or do, you know, I think we were joking about doing or you were joking with Andrea Tefelsky about doing a gas station.
Yeah. Mini bottles.
Yeah, that
Dude,
would
I
be
want to do.
amazing.
I'd love to have like 4 people or 3 people, like 4 of us on, and all of us have mini bottles. You know what I'm saying? The mini bottle madness.
I think
That,
that would be.
that would be fun.
You can just call the podcast Snake Juice. Like that.
Oh man.
All
Well,
right, man.
cool. All right. Well, let me stop the broadcast. I've never done it on this app before, so thank you everybody for tuning in. If you wouldn't mind, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Blah blah blah. Plug the channel, and I will see you probably not next week. Probably take some time off and come back in January and do a couple live streams in January, solo live streams. So thank you all for tuning in. This was a lot of fun, and thank you to Josh for being on here. I'm going to end the broadcast, and then I'll let you go, Josh.
All
Sorry.
right. Thanks, man. Thanks, everybody.